this computer. Carol.
Good morning and welcome to New Canaan Beautification League members and friends, including a like-minded group of gardener guests from the Wellfleet Garden Club in Cape Cod, Massachusetts. Hope it's a beautiful day there today too. So wonderful that so many are joining us for today's meeting and special program, There's No Place Like Home for Your Plants. A bright bouquet of thanks to Patricia Spagani, our dedicated Zoom host who keeps her cool no matter what may happen to pop up. More thanks to Faith Kirchhoff for her totally wonderful presentation 2 weeks ago and about our organization's history and many projects. Thanks to Rob Carpenter for his ever so kind and moving remarks at the dedication of the beautiful bench honoring Faith in Mead Park. If you haven't had a chance to go sit on it, maybe today's the day. It's beautiful, it's right in the plaza. Thanks also to Robin Bates Mason for organizing press coverage from the Advertiser. There was a great color picture, which is a real coup, an article in Thursday's paper. Speaking of pictures, please send your pictures of autumn beauty and various plants that catch your eye to Fanny Moran, and we will publish them in the newsletter. You can be a published photographer. How about that? So today, Jolly Frank will be introducing our guest speaker, Nancy Kline Gorkin, owner of Earth Garden, which has been a fixture in New Canaan for floral loveliness for many years. But before she does, I want to share a little backstory about Jolly. You know how one thing leads to another, right? Well, 5 years ago, in 2015, Shirley Stansick, I hope Shirley's on this webinar today. Shirley and I were looking for talented designers to showcase in the Beautification League's major event called Tablescapes. Back then, before social distancing was the norm, we packed the house of Waveney for an unmasked luncheon of 120. Those were the days, right? Anyway, Shirley and I saw an eye-catching photo spread in Connecticut Cottages and Garden magazine of home interiors created by designer Jolly Frank. We didn't know her, she didn't know us. Anyway, Shirley called her up. Jolly not only provided a sophisticated and memorable tablescape, but the floral arrangement that she created was absolutely stunning. Since then, Jolly has helped me, Gloria Simon, and perhaps some other members I don't know about on interior projects and updates in their homes. Jolly has been a Beautification League member for several years, an important member of the programs committee, and a valued friend. So now that I have introduced the introducer, take it away, Jolly.
Thank you so much, Carol. That was totally unnecessary. Good morning, everyone. As you now know, I'm Jolly Frank and a member of the program committee. It's my pleasure to introduce Nancy Kline Gorkin today, owner of Earth Garden in New Canaan, Connecticut. During the introduction, Patricia is going to post 2 questions that are going to come up on your screen. And if you would take a second to answer them, that would be great. It's going to, here they come right now. So you'll see, oh, this is actually, now we have the outline of Nancy's presentation, but the questions will come up in a second. It will help Nancy better understand her audience. Now on to Nancy and how she ended up at Earth Garden. I had a conversation with her yesterday to get a little background. Ever since she was a young girl, Nancy loved plants and gardens. Her interest never wavered, and she was lucky enough to have an advisor in high school with a background in horticulture. He helped steer her in the right direction, and she ended up attending Michigan State. She also met her husband there. After graduating with a degree in ornamental horticulture, they moved to Long Island. Nancy originally wanted to specialize in nonprofit botanical gardens, but in 1991, a friend and her husband invited Nancy to join them in a business venture. After searching for years, Earth Garden in New Canaan became available and proved to be exactly what they were looking for. Nancy has happily been growing the business since then. At the beginning of the pandemic, they had to close Earth Garden for 2 months. Nancy had to downsize her staff and move the studio into her home. When Earth Garden was allowed to reopen, a number of original staff were unwilling to return. The stimulus unemployment checks provided more than what they were earning. Pivoting once again, Nancy streamlined her operations and added free delivery. Her business has been booming ever since. Nancy has shown great resilience and dedication in difficult times, but actually likes this new adaptation better than before the pandemic. Thank you so much, Nancy, for taking the time to speak to us this morning. Before she starts her presentation, and Patricia, do you have the poll? Are the questions up? There we go. Okay, so we put, and I guess the presenters don't see the questions. We put these questions out. Actually, there we go. People are starting to answer them. So maybe we'll take a second while people are answering. The results are coming in. So Nancy, I just wanted to thank you for taking the time to present to us this morning. And I hope everybody gets a chance to go in and see your beautiful shop, because it really is stunning. And I love, especially the decorations around your doorway are always amazing. So kudos to you. So the questions that we put out are, number one, do you have indoor plants? So far, it looks like 86% of you do. And then the second question was, how long have you kept your indoor plants alive? So the good news is that less than 6 months is only 3%. 6 months to a year is 13%, and more than 1 year is 79%. And there's a very small 5% that says, that answered, I kill every indoor plant. So that's great. So Nancy, that gives you a better idea of your audience. So if you want to take your presentation from here, that would be great. Thanks.
Good morning, everyone. I would like to enlarge the screen because I'm still looking at, oh, there you are. Okay, thank you. First of all, I feel very privileged to be speaking to the New Canaan Beautification League. I think we're all like-minded people, all plant lovers and garden lovers. And I truly admire all of the work that you all do around town. It really goes very noticed by me and my team. So kudos to all of you. I know you're a very dedicated, hands-on group, and I am as well. So my goal this morning is to introduce some plants that you might not be familiar with, and to discuss also some plants that you might have a little trouble overwintering or putting in the right spot in your home. And I also wanted to talk about some pretty foolproof plants that I've had success with over the years, and a couple of new introductions. So I know you have the outline that was sent, and I'm just going to switch around the topics at what I'm going to discuss a little bit. So what I'd like to start with are the foolproof houseplants that we've had really good luck with in people's homes and offices. I have my assistant Claire, who's with me today, who's going to be handing me the plants. And I think that will help with the, so I don't have to keep leaving the screen. So Claire, if we could start first with the old-fashioned Nephthys plant, which I think I grew, or my mother grew, when I was in high school. And I remember spending a lot of time helping her repot plants, and we always had plants in our house and a big vegetable garden. So when I was in high school, I actually competed at the Detroit Institute of Science in a science experiment, and I won first place, and it was about houseplants. So that got me hooked on houseplants for my entire life. But this is the pretty old-fashioned Nephthys. it's very hard to kill this plant. And right now, this plant is really light. We have it sort of placed in this basket, and which means it can dry out to a period where it doesn't even wilt. I think it probably has been 10 days at least, or 2 weeks since we watered it. We tend to, Claire, I'm going to hand you that, and if you could bring me the Monstera. We tend to go very easy on the watering with the tropical plants because they really like to dry out in between watering. They don't like to sit in water. So this is the pretty traditional Monstera that you see in a lot of design magazines. People will cut these leaves and just leave them in a vase of water, and they last for months, just like this. I cut these from an office that we take care of up in Danbury from one of their plants because it had grown so big, and they've been sitting on the shelf here for, I think, 3 weeks. So another really easy plant to grow. And this is sort of a smaller leaf version of the traditional Monstera. So they bred it into, a smaller leaf, and it doesn't get quite as gangly. And it does very well in low light. Another foolproof tropical plant. And another tropical plant that's very foolproof is the Zizi Plant. So if I could have that one next. The 2 plants that I just showed you are very easy to take care of in terms of insect problems. The thing that you might want to do with the Monstera is just wash the leaves, just to keep dust and mites off. And what I use is soap and water. I use Mrs. Meyer's dishwashing detergent, just mix it with water and wash the leaves. And that's a good thing to do going into the winter, because then once the heat comes on, there's a lot of dry air floating around. So the Zizi plant, I'll kind of show you it this way. It's really a succulent plant. I would put it in the category of a succulent. It likes to dry out completely in between waterings, but does require high light. So you need to put it in a spot where there's quite a bit of sun and water, I would say maybe once a month. This is just in a plastic pot because we had it set into a basket. But another great plant to use as a focal point from a design standpoint, it really is a nice structural plant. And another interesting one is the Ponytail Palm, which we love. It truly is a ponytail. These are very easy to grow. Again, kind of highlight. It doesn't need full sun, but a medium amount of sun. And the one thing that the ponytail grows out of the tips of the palm, if you can see that, they just grow from the top. So the only thing you need to do with this is, sometimes prune some of the little leaves off from the bottom. So this one doesn't really need pruning. I'm just sort of showing you how it is. But it might get a few little brown leaves every now and then. Again, if you want to just give this a little soap and water before the winter, that would really help it. And again, let it dry out completely. We water probably every 2 weeks on this. And I would like the Fatsia japonica next. This is a fairly new plant that I haven't really seen that much in the market. I found it at a grower on Long Island that they get it shipped up from Florida, obviously, but it really is a very low light plant and doesn't require a lot of water. And again, about every 2 weeks we water it. And this one is a little more susceptible to insect problems under the leaves, so it's a good idea to wash the leaves periodically just to keep them clean and fresh. And honestly, if you do that with most of your indoor plants, you shouldn't get a lot of insect or disease problems. And I'll take the Philodendron Birkin next. This is a new plant for me. I really love the this variation of the leaves. And this is related to a Monstera. You know, the philodendrons come in many shapes and sizes. I know we think of philodendron as the little heart-shaped trailing plant, but there are so many different philodendrons. So I tried this plant a couple weeks ago. I've been letting it sort of sit in a low light spot just to observe it. And again, very little water, and it's just kind of cool. I love the leaves. So that's a new introduction for me. And I'll take the Aglaonema next. This is a very common indoor plant, and again, really comes in variations of leaf color. It's called Aglaonema, and you can find it in sort of a reddish leaved form or pink. Very pretty in terms of the variation of foliage. Again, very low light and not too much water. They really like to dry out. You can see that we have planted this in a pot that does not have drainage, which is not the best thing for houseplants, I will admit. A lot of people don't want to deal with saucers and water collecting, and then they have to worry about the floor. So they prefer things to be in containers that don't have drainage. But in this little container, we can't really put a little saucer and plunk the plant in. So we just have to be really careful with the watering if you do use a container that doesn't have drainage. But the plant can thrive. I would say probably water this every 3 weeks and give it maybe half a cup of water, 3/4 of a cup. And I will take the Begonias and the Peperomias next. These are two plants that we really love. We put them in a lot of mixed planted creations. But they have great variation of leaves. This is a pinkish version, and this is the green and white. And this is a trailing plant that works really well with a lot of, if you want to put it in a combination with other plants. This one is the same thing, but it grows a little more upright than trailing. And these both like to dry out completely again. So you don't really have to worry too much about the watering. And here's another old-fashioned plant that I'm sure a lot of people have had. I know I used to grow them when I was a teenager, a Peperomia. And Peperomias, again, have come in so many different color variations and, dark green. There's one with a silver leaf. So they're great. Again, very low light, easy to take care of, not too much water. This is one that I absolutely love. Claire, do you have the label for this one? Peperomia petulta, I think. I just picked it up. Oh, here it is. Petiolata, I'm sorry. Peperomia petiolata, if you can find that. I found these over the years at different growers, but I hadn't recently, and then we took a little field trip to Oliver's the other day, and I found it, and I was so excited because I wanted to show it to you. It's a really beautiful sort of trailing and upright plant, and it produces these little pink buds, which I think are really cool, and then they turn to green. Very low light again, and easy to care for. I think that is it for my, one more thing, the Canela Tree. This is, I have to bring it over to you because of adjusted the screen. Let me move these guys. This is actually a cinnamon tree. It's not the one that you get the cinnamon from, but Canela is its common name, C-A-N-E-L-A. I found it down on Long Island, I would say about 6 months ago, and I wasn't familiar with it, so I've been testing it in my kitchen. I have sort of bright light, and it has performed so well. I water it maybe every 2 weeks, but I let the water come out the bottom. I have it sitting in a saucer inside the galvanized container, and it has dropped maybe 3 leaves. So this is my new, I'm going to start introducing this into people's homes because some of my clients are having trouble with the fiddly fig, which has been the staple in design and used as an indoor tree for a long time. And they are really easy to care for, but they sometimes go into shock when you move them from one location to another. So I just wanted an alternative to give to people, and it has a beautiful dark green shiny foliage. Again, I haven't seen any insect problems on it yet, so I'll watch it over the winter, but this is, I'm really excited about this tree. So that's my new introduction. And I think there was 2 more plants in my, sorry that I missed in my Easy Care tried and true. I'll take the sign. This is related to the pothos, and here's the sign. It's the Scindapsus. It's sort of a succulent-y version of the regular pothos plant, and it's much more interesting. I absolutely love this plant, and it is a little bit hard to find. I keep this in a container that does not have drainage, so I'm really careful about watering. They do like to dry out completely, and I think I water it about once a month. I give it maybe a half a cup of water. So this is something that I really love.
Hey Nancy.
Yes.
Excuse me, it's Patricia. One of the questions we got was if can you comment on these plants as you're showing them as to whether they're pet friendly or not? If you have any experience with that?
I am not that well versed with the pet-friendly plant. I know that recently I wanted to put a ficus into a home for a photo shoot, and she had heard that ficus is toxic to cats, so we chose something that we chose a palm tree instead. But I can't say that I'm that well versed in that area. I'm sorry about that. So I can't comment. I have 2 pets, and I've never had any trouble with them eating plants or getting into my plants. So I don't have a lot of experience, I'm sorry.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, sorry about that. This is the creeping fig. It is a ficus, so this probably would be toxic to animals. And this is an alternative to the English ivy, which sometimes in the winter especially is difficult in a home. They tend to get spider mites or other insect problems. The creeping fig kind of mimics the ivy if you need a trailing plant, and it's loves to dry out. It likes to get dry before you water it, and it's a slow grower, so it's one of my favorites. And whenever I can buy them, I buy them in bulk from many of our growers. I'm going to move on now to begonias, Rex and Rhizomatic Begonias, which are my personal favorite. I have a pretty extensive collection, and I love these in the winter because that's their blooming time. So let's start with some of the Rex begonias. Yeah, that's a good one. They come in so many different color variations, and yeah, that's good. Okay, so I've got these 3 here. They make great house plants. Again, they love to dry out. They do like a little sun. I would say morning sun is really helpful. And sometimes the leaves will sort of get a crack or a break in them. And then what you do is, let me just show you here. This one has a little tear. So if it bothers you, you just clip it back to that point. Or if it becomes too unruly, you just literally cut it back. These, see, this just has a little tear, but they're very insect and disease resistant. And they're excellent if you want to make a little cut flower arrangement. These leaves they hold up really well, and they add so much interest to a flower arrangement. This is one of my favorites. It's called the Escargot Begonia because it looks like it has a little swirl. You can see this one, it really wasn't doing well. So sometimes these begonias will just all of a sudden start kind of rotting. And it's not necessarily because they were watered too much, just something happens. So you can actually take the plant down right to, cut it back pretty hard to where the first new growth is, and it'll start sending out new leaves. So don't give up on these Rex begonias. If it starts looking bad, just really cut it back, try to get all of the rotted material or leaves out, and it will, and don't water too much, but it will send out new leaves. And this is a cute one I just picked up on Long Island that I really like. And then let's go to some of the Rhizomatic Begonias, which that one and this one right here. Yeah. This one is my favorite, and I can't remember the botanical name of it. I found this recently at Shakespeare's Garden. If you haven't been there, it's up in Brookfield, Connecticut, and they have some specialty begonias. And you can see that it's already started flowering. And that's the bloom time. It's a little bit early. Usually they bloom in January, February, March. So I'm kind of excited that it already started blooming. And I have this sitting in this stand, which I can't, sorry. It's just a little metal stand. And I like to elevate it a little bit because it tends to, the branches tend to hang down to the table. So it just gives it a little more elevation in order to grow properly. And again, these, if you have any trouble with leaves, rotting, or, you just pull out the dead leaves, and if a stem happens to break or rot, in fact, I'll just cut one off. You just give it a clip and it'll send out new growth along some of the other stems. You don't want to be bashful with these because they can handle it. This is another one of my favorites. I picked this up at Trade Secrets, which unfortunately did not happen this year, up in Sharon, Connecticut, and I just love it. I think Campo di Fiore was growing it in their booth, but it's also started flowering and has these little fuzzy leaves. This one is a little chlorotic. I don't know if you can tell that from the screen because I've been very remiss on fertilizing my begonias, but now that I'm bringing them inside, I will start a fertilizer program. And basically, I would recommend the Jack's houseplant fertilizer because it's got the right ratio for houseplants, and you can use that just diluted in water, and probably once a month, I would say during the winter would be good. In the summer, you could fertilize a little bit more. The Rhino Begonia. You can also, once you cut these off, if there are if there's a branch, you can put these just in a glass of water, similar to this, the vase, and it will start sending out roots. This is a begonia that I discovered a couple of, maybe 5 years ago, from Beds and Borders on Long Island, which we buy a lot of annuals from. And it's kind of an unusual thing for them to grow because I don't think I would use these in containers necessarily. It's called Rhino because it just keeps growing like Jack and the Beanstalk. And it's got these beautiful fuzzy, sort of almost succulent-y green leaves, gray-green. It's Begonia Vernosa is its botanical name. And this one, I was remiss in staking it. So it's kind of flopping over, but it's sending out two little babies in the middle. So what I'm going to do once these get a little taller is I will cut this. I could do it now, but I don't want to. I'll cut this and then root the begonia and make a new plant. We have another one sort of in the incubation period right now at our design studio. Oh, this is the one? Oh, this is the one we just rooted. I'm sorry, Claire reminded me. So this one grew some roots and now it's a plant. And these are very hard to find. I had somebody come from Derby, Connecticut recently looking for this particular begonia, and luckily we have one for her to purchase. And I think we'll move on now to ferns, which ferns are a little tricky. So let me do the holly fern and the foxtail and bird's nest. This one is called the holly fern. And it's a little bit easier than other ferns because it has a thicker, more dense foliage. It's not so delicate like the Maidenhair Fern, which we will talk about. So I would highly recommend this. I just love it. And the foxtail is another fern that's pretty easy to grow, and it doesn't mind drying out, which is unusual for ferns. Most ferns really like to be wet or do not like to dry out and stay dry. So I would, if you can get a hold of these, they're just great. I had actually the Asparagus Fern, which is similar to this. It has the really fuzzy foliage. It was so big I couldn't get it here, but that's another one that's very similar. And you all know probably the Staghorn ferns, which are, they like to be mounted because the way they grow is in a tree. I have a girlfriend down in Florida that has a big one in her tree, and it just wraps around the tree limb, and that's how they grow. So that's why up here we mount them on wood, but they can also be grown in pots. They're not, you know, this is a little one that it doesn't mind being grown. You just have to be careful not to keep it too wet, because they grow in a tree. There's a lot of air circulation, and you just have to be careful not to leave the soil too wet. Okay. And then I think we'll talk about, the bird's nest fern. This is a really fun fern, and also pretty easy to grow, but it does need a lot of water. And the way you water it is, if you can see into the center, you literally pour the water. I should have a watering can somewhere here. You pour the water right into the center, similar to the way you would water a bromelia. And you'll just let the water go down into the soil and completely saturate it. They do like to be wet, but it's a very easy plant, and it's a nice decorative accent in rooms because it's so structural. It's a great plant. And look up the terrace, that green and white. And then I'll do the main here. This is a terrace fern, P-T-E-R-I-S. There are a whole a bunch of different terrace ferns. These tall things are actually the fertile fronds that are going to be forming. So what will happen with these, once they get big enough, you're going to find a lot of the spores will grow under the leaves. And I know one of my customers was kind of freaked out. She thought it was a bunch of insects. And I said, no, those are the fertile fronds. And if you're a propagator, you can propagate new ferns from those. So if you don't like the way they look, which I kind of don't, this is such a pretty fern that I think I'll prune them off. And this fern grows from little, they produce new tendrils. That's another one. Inside the plant. So you want to always pull any dead leaves off, just so the new ones can keep shooting out from the middle. So it grows similar to a maidenhair fern, which we will talk about next. I just brought in 2 maidenhair ferns from a container's client that we pulled out. And I was, normally you would kind of look at this and say, this looks terrible. But the trick with maidenhair ferns, and this may happen to your maidenhair, if you let it dry out, all of a sudden it'll just turn brown, and it doesn't give you any notice. It just sort of turns brown. But what you can do with maidenhairs is take the entire plant and you snip like this, and it will send out new growth from inside, the little fronds that unfurl. And I did that too. Every now and then I actually have a maidenhair that doesn't perform well because of neglect, and I'm pretty fastidious, but it does happen to me as well. So I don't know if you can see this clear. This is a maidenhair fern that I had to cut back because it dried out. But you can see I let it grow all summer and on my deck in the shade, and I keep it in a saucer of water. And look at it. I'm going to have to edit it a little bit before I bring it in, but I'm really excited about how well it did. And the one thing about maidenhair ferns is they actually don't mind cool temperatures. They can tolerate, about, I would say 45, even 40. So you can leave them outside for quite a while. And I put mine in my, I have an unheated office that it has insulated windows, but it stays pretty cold. So a lot of my plants come into my office for the winter because they prefer it a little more on the cold side, and I can keep them away from the heat source, which ferns definitely don't like. So let's move on now to topiaries. One of our favorite topiaries here at Earth Garden is myrtle. We can't get enough myrtles, and they just are a real classic plant. They are a little tricky to grow though, and you can't really see. I'm going to lower this one. It's a double boa myrtle. They do not like to dry out, and they will not wilt. They'll just all of a sudden turn brown and crispy. So what I tell people is to, if you have to go away for a weekend or even a week, just fill up a bowl of water and literally, as much as it can hold, and put the topiary in the water. That way it will stay moist. And then take it out of the sun also. Just it's better. It's not growing too much while you're away. Otherwise, we keep our myrtles here in the shop. They get morning sun, very full morning sun. And that's really the best light for myrtles. They don't really like that southern exposure. It's a little too harsh for them. And the only thing that these need, you can, some people ask, does it help to spray them? They really don't need to be sprayed, but they do need to be clipped every now and then. These, I have a pair of scissors. Just to, if you can let them grow a little bit wild if you like, but a lot of people like them really tight. So you just give them a little haircut like that. It's not, there's nothing really scientific about it. It's just, you're shaping them. So this double myrtle comes from, let me show you again, because I love the pot too, comes from Atlock Farm down in New Jersey. I haven't gotten down there lately. I'm trying to get there because they grow the most beautiful topiaries. It's about a 3.5 hour drive, so it's a little bit of a schlep. And then I'll talk about Santolina. It's another favorite plant. This is a little globe Santolina. And the other thing, some of these plants bring a lot of aromatherapy into the home for the winter, which I love. And Santolina has a pungent smell, so some people may not like it, but it's a really easy plant to grow. However, this topiary, which came from Atlock Farm also, I think we overwatered it or didn't give it enough sun, because these do need a lot of sun. And this thing was so brown and it looked like it was going to die, but I didn't give up on it. I clipped it, I shaped it, and I grew it on my deck for the summer, and now voila. And I really thought I was going to have to throw it out, or compost it, I should say. I don't throw any plants in the garbage, I compost. So now here's another one this is one of my favorite, it's a pelargonium, the scented geranium. And this is a sort of a free form, and these produce beautiful pink flowers in the winter. And it has a beautiful lemony scent. So this is another plant for aromatherapy. I do keep this in my cold office during the winter because it does prefer to be on the cold side, but it can stay in a warm room as well. Lots of sun, loves sun. And then this is the Prince Rupert version of it. Again, this is a topiary that I bought at Atlock Farm, and I did something wrong, and this is where we're at now. It wasn't a ball shaped when I got it. Two things are going on with this. One is it's reverting back to the green, the regular geranium, so I'm going to cut those out because I want to put the energy into the topiary. I just need to put my glasses on for this part. And I'm going to try to reshape this so that it's going to form something of a ball at some point. And I'll just do a little quick cut, and then as the winter progresses, I'll just keep my eye on it and try to get it back into some sort of shape. So that's just the first edit. And then it will send out new growth from inside here. You can see some of the, I don't know if you can see that, but there is new growth coming out of the middle. So I'm not giving up on it. I'm gonna try to get it to be like the Santolina. And then Rosemary is another one that, this is a Rosemary Jack and Beanstalk. Is hard to grow inside during the winter. It really needs a cold period. So again, if you have an old house like me, you should have a cold room or a cold window that you can put your rosemary in. But I love having rosemary during the winter for cooking. So it's worthwhile to try to grow it. And I'm going to show you my Peppermint Dranium, which is my pride and joy. This one this is, the Peppermint Dranium has the fuzzy green leaves, which are also great in flower arrangements. And this thing is just gone crazy. So what I'm going to do is just really hack it back before I bring it inside for the winter. And I'm not going to repot it because they prefer to be pot bound. I'll clean this up a little bit better, but I'm just showing you that you can really hack away at your plants when you bring them in, because you don't want to let them go, and they're worth saving. So I did an edit of that much so far. I'll probably take a little more off, maybe over here. So, and then I'll use these in cut flower arrangements all winter, and again, a great aromatherapy. So I'm going to talk about the bay laurel. This is a bay laurel tree that I've been growing. I got it at Detroit Garden Works in the Detroit area. So it's a little plant about this big, and it's now about 5 feet tall. But I love to use fresh bay leaves in cooking. The only problem with this is it gets terrible scale. And there is a little bit of scale on some of the leaves. What I prefer to do with scale, because I don't like to use pesticides, especially if I'm going to be eating or cooking with the leaves, I take the Mrs. Meyer's lemon verbena with soap, hot water, and just wash each of the undersides of the leaves and clip off anything that looks really infested. And again, it likes it to be cold in the winter. It doesn't really like a warm room. Same with, I also overwinter olive trees and citrus trees. What I do is I put them in my garage, which stays about 45 degrees for the winter. And I have 2 western windows, so they do get sunlight. But the trees, they don't do a lot of growing during the winter. They need a dormant period. And the citrus will bloom actually in the garage, which is great. And then I have my lemon tree is just loaded with lemons right now. And the olive will start shedding probably in about March. It really sheds a lot of leaves, but then I bring it back out. I have 3 olive trees that I have successfully overwintered. And I did bring one with me, so I'll just show you. I'll show you what this looks like. So what I'll do with the olive is I'll prune it back, because we like to use the olive foliage in our floral arrangements. So I'll kind of shake this, cut it back a little bit. And then honestly, in the spring, once you put it out, it sends out new growth. This is one of my favorites, and I keep them in my pots all summer. In this category also this is a Eucalyptus Goony Eye, which I kind of trade secrets also. I just love this plant. It's another aromatherapy plant. It is so easy to take care of. I've grown it inside, outside on my deck. It does like sun, and it has such a feathery gray-green feeling, which I love. Am I doing okay for time? Okay, if not, just interrupt me. I just have orchids and anthurium that I'd like to discuss, and succulents. I'm not going to talk about terrariums this morning because I think the space is too it's hard, it's such an intricate thing that I decided to leave that out. Let's do orchids. And I wanted to talk about, I know some people are afraid of orchids. They think they're hard to take care of. They don't know how to water them or repot them. So I brought a couple of examples. This is, a Phalaenopsis orchid, which, we kind of decorate with kiwi, and orchids are very popular here at Earth Garden. We sell quite a few. And what we recommend, again, this container does not have drainage, so it's really important not to overwater. These are the roots that are sort of coming out of the side. Orchids again grow on trees, which is why they produce those roots. And this one, I would say probably a half a cup of water every 10 days. Orchids don't like to be in full sun. They like to be in low light in order to hold their bloom as long as possible. They also don't like changes in temperature. So it's really important to have consistent temperature. This orchid, Phalaenopsis, I don't know if you can see this one. We weren't able to sell this one because it was pretty blown, we call it. And we like to sell our orchids with a lot of buds on them. So I put it in my kitchen and just did an experiment. And this thing has been sitting in this pot for probably 2 months, and I've watered it once. One of the reasons I think orchids actually thrive on neglect somewhat. This is in a sphagnum moss, which I think it's okay. You can see the roots look pretty healthy, actually. A lot of growers use this because it's easier to transport orchids in sphagnum moss than bark. But if you had a preference, bark is better. Or if you had a choice, I should say. Bark is actually a better thing to do. So I have one little orchid here. And this is an orchid pot. And the little holes are here because the roots that come out the sides. So I'm going to take this orchid. And if you have to repot an orchid, you can get this bark material online. I just did a little research this morning. There's so much online, by the way, for resources for house plants and supplies. One site, let me finish the orchid first, I'm sorry. Okay, so what we want to do is just get everything out from the middle of the plant and trim back any roots that don't look good. This isn't too bad, I don't see anything. This is a brand new orchid, that's probably why. And then you just want to hold the orchid like this and just keep adding the bark around it until, and some people like to grow orchids on even after they finish blooming. If you do that, once this is finished, you should leave the stalk because that's where the new shoots will come out. And then orchids can be fertilized with an orchid fertilizer during the winter months or when they're out of bloom, but not while they're in bloom. So basically, that's what you want to do. And then when you go to water the, let me just borrow the saucer for a second. When you water the orchid that's planted in bark, you want to let it drain completely out the bottom. So you just keep watering until it drains. And you can actually let it sit in the water for 5 to 15 minutes. And then once it's drained, you can go back into its saucer. And if you want to add a stake or something into this, you can. But this is the optimal way to grow an orchid with an orchid terracotta pot and orchid bark. But again, most of the orchids we buy around here are all in sphagnum moss. Another plant that's kind of related to orchids are anthuriums. So if I could have those next, Claire. Yep. In the meantime, I'll give you 2 websites. One is called thesill.com, and they talk about a lot about plant care. I found a lot of information there when I was doing research. And they also, I think it's more care than selling. And then Woody's Garden Goods, they sell all kinds of house plants and supplies. I was very impressed with their selection. And they also give you information about the plants. This is a very easy plant to grow. Produces these white sort of greenish flowers. You can get them in pink, red, green. And we really like the little mini version of it, the mini anthurium. Even when they finish flowering, they still have really pretty leaves and very insect and disease resistant, not too much water. Again, they like to dry out. And they make great gifts because they're long lasting. I think most people probably associate the anthurium with the red color. That seems to be the most popular color that's grown. Okay, and succulents would be my last topic. So I'm just going to show you a couple of succulents that we have in stock right now. I brought a jade plant that so this is a little succulent collection. I think succulents are so popular because they're fairly easy to grow. The one thing that we find that people have trouble with is they tend to stretch, and that means they probably aren't getting enough light. But succulents do produce flowers, which is usually a tall stalk, and they will have to be cut back if that's the case. But this is just a little sweet collection of, there's some sempervivum, sedum, echeveria, Eucalyptus. And then this, again, has no drainage in the bottom, so you have to be careful with watering. I would say at the most every 2 weeks, and maybe just 1/8 of a cup of water to each plant. Here's another little combination. Claire is our succulent grower designer. And then this is a jade plant, which is one of the old-fashioned, tried and true succulents that we all had when we were kids. It had lost its shape. I can't remember exactly what it looked like. So I put it on my deck and grew it all summer. It actually looks pretty good. It needs a little editing. Some of the leaves look like this, and that's no big deal. But this is a great structural plant that just doesn't give you a lot of grief at all. Just very easy to grow. And here's a succulent that has, this is an aloe that has the flowers. So once these flowers are finished, you just cut it right back to the bottom. It's sending out a new flower here. It's got some little beads in here. And this, I don't know if you can see this, but there are actually 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 plants in here. So if you wanted to, you could take it out of its pot and make babies from it. And basically, you just pull them off, and there's a baby right there. So if you're into, propagating or just, growing on little plants, that's very easy to do. And can you know the name of this one? Okay. This is an unusual one that we just found somewhere. I can't remember, but it's kind of cool because Long Island. It grows these little ridges. So I just experimented with it, but I really like it. It looks like a calanto to me, if I had to guess, of some sort. So I have to do a little research and find out what that is. And let me just make sure I didn't miss anything. I think I've covered everything that I wanted to and that I brought for show and tell. So if you have any questions, I would be happy to answer them at this point.
Hi, Nancy. So I've been monitoring the Q&A, and there are a number of questions that people have been asking. So let's just start down here. I think Patricia already asked about pet-friendly plants, and maybe what we can do, there are a number of people who also couldn't hear some of the names. So what we're going to do is come up with a list of plants. Maybe you and I can come up with a list of plants. And then we might connect that with an image of the plant so that people remember, what plant to what name. And then it was hard to hear some of the nurseries that you go to. So maybe what we'll also do is do a list of some of those nurseries that you had mentioned.
Yeah, I can do a follow-up for you and list the nurseries. And I can also list all of the plants that I discussed.
Great.
If I have time, I could actually take pictures of them. But I don't, actually, because I did make a lot of signs, so it might be helpful if I put the sign in the plant and took a picture. Would that work?
That would work great. The problem with those signs is there's a lot of light, so you can't actually.
Yeah, I could tell that it was reflecting.
Then So now on to more specific questions. Somebody asked, how much light does rosemary need?
Rosemary likes a lot of sun, so I would say the more sun, the better. I overwinter my rosemary in a eastern exposure. And actually, now that I'm thinking about it, the rosemary that I'm showing you has been in the shop for a couple of months, and it gets just morning light. So I take that back. It just needs some direct sun, pretty intense at some point of the day. So it doesn't have to be southern or western, but morning is fine.
To give you an idea, I used to live in Southern California and people have hedges of rosemary. So the more light, the better.
Yeah.
Then another question was, any special potting medium for houseplants?
Asphoma makes a nice potting mix, and it's organic, which is good. Miracle Grow also has a container mix, and they're doing organic now as well. But Asphoma products are really excellent.
So maybe we could put that on the bottom of your list of plants, just so that that's available.
Yeah.
The next question is, how much do you fertilize houseplants?
In the winter, I would say once a month, and a little, and then during the growing season, maybe every 2 weeks. If you put it out during the summer, I would fertilize more because that's when they're actively growing. They don't tend to grow a lot in the winter, except I have to say the pelargoniums do grow quite a bit. My peppermint dranium, when I bring it in, tends to grow a lot. But I really don't fertilize my pelargoniums much. Any herb type of plant does not require a lot of fertilizer. It's more the tropicals that require fertilizer. Myrtles about once a month. So, regularly, but it doesn't have to be every time you water.
Okay. Then another person asked, do all succulents flower? She's having a hard time and none of her succulents have flowered. So she asked if there's something she could do to get them to flower.
I think for succulents, it's kind of a maturity factor. When they're young and immature, they tend to not flower. I would say a 6-inch pot size is when they start to produce blooms. And all succulents will bloom at some point, but some are more floriferous than others. The echeverries especially are really good for flowering, and they produce these really long, dramatic flower spikes.
Another question is, and this is one I'm interested in too, is how do you transition a plant that's been outside all summer into your home?
I wait until as late as possible to bring my plants in. I watch, the frost temperatures because the plant, if you leave it outside, it will acclimate to the temperatures. And then, it depends what it is. If it's a tropical plant, you have to bring it in a little bit earlier. But you could isolate it for a little while. Should check for, Claire actually made a good point. Check the bottoms of the pots to make sure there are no slugs or bugs, insects on the bottom. Kind of wash the pot and wash the plant as well before you bring it indoors. But because I move a lot of my plants from outdoors to my cold porch or garage, the transition isn't traumatic. It's, they've acclimated to the cooler temperatures.
So would it be helpful to maybe take an outdoor plant and put it maybe in a at least maybe not a heated space, but like your garage, and then move them inside?
Yeah, yes, I think that would be a good idea.
Okay. Then another comment was, my succulents are sprawling out, what to do?
I think that's a light factor. It's probably not getting enough light. They really like full sun. And you can cut them back. If it's starting to sprawl, you can trim them back, but and you can root them as well. They're very easy. You can just stick them in like a sandy soil mixture. If it's too late, too gnarly and out of control, it's probably better to start all over. Or just snip and see what happens. I mean, we're always happy if you bring it in here. I'm happy to look at your plants. People bring in plants all the time. Or send pictures. You can also send pictures to our cell phone.
Right. Would you ever mix a succulent with a non-succulent?
Occasionally we do, yeah, like Canela plants, we would mix, which is a flowering plant, you know, and I purposely didn't talk a lot about flowering plants. Claire's handing me something right now. I'll take this one. So this is a little succulent that's mixed with a creeping fig, and both of them like to dry out in between watering, but creeping fig is definitely not a succulent. And then this we put, this is a little calendiva with a sedum and a little creeping fig. So you can mix, but they have to have similar watering. That's the key, is you have to use plants that like to dry out, similar to succulents. I wouldn't put a fern with a succulent. That probably wouldn't work out well.
Okay, another one came in. New plant is known as mother of millions, as each little edge flower on each leaf makes a new plant.
Oh, the succulent?
Yeah.
It's mother of millions? Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Because its little things fall off and they have roots.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Yeah. Then citrus trees. I know I've got some citrus trees that I bring in every winter, lemons and limes, but any suggestion on overwintering? They're not very happy if they get.
Well, they don't really like to go into the house. The temperatures are too warm. If you think about it, you know, in Florida, the temperatures do get a little cooler in the winter. So you have to think about the environment that the plant actually grows in, you know, normally. They go through a period where they're not actively growing, but they produce their flowers in the winter. So I put mine in my unheated garage, which stays about 45 degrees, and it gets the western sun. Because they do need some light during the winter. They can't go into a dark space. But I have never heard of anyone being successful with citrus in a home that's 68 to 72 degrees with the kind of heat that we have to produce in the winter. If you happen to have a room that you don't heat, that's sunny, that would be ideal, or a solarium, that's very cool, but it's the cool temperatures that are the most important. And then they also don't need much water during the winter. Or fertilizer. Yeah, you don't really need
November to March, you don't fertilize.
Yeah.
You should fertilize citrus between November and March when they're in the flowering stage.
I've managed to keep my lemon and lime trees alive indoors through 6 winters, but they're almost dead by the time we get to spring. And then when they go outside, though, it's amazing. They absolutely perk back up, and then they're covered in flowers in no time. So,
And Jolly, where do you keep your citrus?
in a sunroom with lots of light, but there's also baseboard heating, and it's
Oh, okay.
definitely 68 to 70 degrees.
Yeah, that's probably why they get kind of crispy. So if you have luck that way, then
Yeah,
then that works, then do it. But the cooler temperatures are more ideal. They won't drop as
water
much.
them more because the heat dries them out,
Right.
so I water them more.
Right.
How about things like gardenias?
Gardenias I also put in my garage with the citrus. And I have very good luck overwintering gardenias. They stay about 45 and require very little water. They don't grow during the winter. They just kind of are in a dormant period.
Then there's somebody who said they have a 4-foot tall lemon tree, green but no fruit. What do you think they can do?
Probably needs more sun. I would say they're going to start, they would flower in the winter, so that's when and then they produce their fruit after that. So you want to try to produce flowers, but you need a sunny spot. And
Okay.
they don't really set their flower buds until, I think, like January.
Okay. How do you know if you have to repot the plant into a larger pot? Can a tree such as citrus be kept in the same pot indefinitely?
They can be kept in the same pot for quite a long time because they don't have a huge root system. And they're hard to repot as well, especially if they have fruit on them. Let me see if I have a plant here. Actually, I'll take this. This is my, I know this one's not pot. Oh, my baby laurel. Actually, this is a perfect example. So this thing has been in the same pot this is my bay laurel plant for a couple of years, and it really needs a new pot. So I'm going to pull it out, and basically you can see that there's no soil left. It's all roots. So this needs to go into a pot probably 4 inches wider than the pot it's in. And I think I might wait until next spring to do that because they don't grow a lot in the winter. And then when I take it outside for the summer, I'll transplant it. And you really want to make sure you take the root system and sort of go like that. It just encourages the roots to spread out in the new pot. And that's what you want to do.
Another question is, how do you transition a plant to go outdoors after being inside all winter?
Yeah, that's probably trickier than bringing them in because you don't want to send them outside when it's too cold. I would wait until after early May at the earliest. Yeah, and then also, yeah, it's really important to put them in a very shady spot because when you transition from the light of indoors to the sun, it could kill the plant. The leaves can't handle it, so you have to put them in a very shady spot first before you move them into the sun.
So maybe it'll be the reverse. Maybe you take that from inside into the garage and then slowly out.
Oh yeah, actually that's a good idea. Yeah.
There's somebody has asked, is a screen porch a medium temperature for plants for the winter or a separate garage the better spot?
Yeah, well, the screen porch, unless it has windows, it would be too cold because it would be exposed to the outside.
Right. Okay.
But if it has windows, then I think that would be great.
Then there's another one. There is white mold / fungus on top of the soil for many of my plants. How do I prevent this and now fix this?
I have to ask Claire. That's some sort of rot, fungus.
Yeah, it's
I would change the potting medium.
repotted.
Yeah, I would. And what you want to do, similar to what I did with the orchid, is try to get as much soil off the roots as possible, and get a fresh bag of espoma potting soil and try that because there's some sort of fungus in the soil.
Would you wash the roots at all?
It depends on what kind of plant it is. Some have very fine roots. If it's a plant that kind of like the bay laurel, you could wash them. Yeah, definitely.
Just because if there's some sort of mold or fungus, the spores might be on the roots.
Exactly. Yeah, but changing the soil should help quite a bit.
Okay. Another question is, what about a fig tree that's in the ground? Should I wrap it?
Yes. Yeah, figs need to be protected, definitely. Figs are a tricky plant in this area. My neighbor across the street has a whole fig grove against his garage, and then he built this structure where he's going to cover it with plastic for the winter. But I think I've heard of people being successful wrapping figs, definitely. And it's better if it's in a protected area close to the house rather than just out in the garden somewhere.
Okay. I think that's it for the questions.
Okay.
Does anybody have any other questions? I don't see any more coming in. Okay. Nancy, I thought that was great. I can't wait to go to some of these nurseries. And that event up in Connecticut, I'm blanking on the name, but
Trade Secrets.
Trade Secrets. I've wanted to go for years, and it always ends up being a bad weekend. But
yeah, it is. It's always a bad weekend for me, but I find the best plants there.
Yeah.
Yeah, really cool things.
okay,
Yeah,
cool.
but I definitely will follow up with the nurseries, the names of the plants, potting soil, and whatever else I can think of.
Okay, great. Carol or Patricia, do you want to take it from here?
I think I'm going to. I think we're almost done. Thank you, Nancy. That was a great talk from our Earth Garden. We've learned a lot. You have an amazing variety of plants, and I learned not to overwater in the winter, which I usually do. And also thank you all for tuning in. It was really a great presentation. I hope the group from the Cape enjoyed it too. In fact, my sister from Wisconsin wants to join, so she's going to do that next time. And if you have any friends from out of town, they can come that's one of the benefits of a Zoom or a webinar. They can come from near and far. So that's a really good thing. So we have another program. Lastly, I'll tell you about the program that's coming up, and that will be on Wednesday, November 4, and it's at 9:30 again. And we have an extraordinary program from a gardener from Copia Home and Garden in South Salem, Jen Cipriano, and she's going to speak about creating decorative outside planters. And that can be for Thanksgiving, Christmas, or any time. So I look forward to that. That's about it. That concludes our program for today. And thank you all for joining us.